Hey everybody, welcome to What a Week. I'm Chris McKinnon here with John Keller. It's been another week, John.
Very astute comment there, Chris. Yeah, it sure has. It sure has. August is supposed to be the deadest news time of the year, but it's been chock full.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. Let's start here locally. And two of Mayor Walsh's aides convicted in this Boston Calling situation where they, I guess, basically bullied people into hiring union workers for the festival. Your thoughts on this verdict, Mayor Walsh's reaction to it? He was obviously disappointed by that.
Yeah, it was shocking. I think everyone was surprised by this. Keep in mind this case got thrown out in an earlier iteration because they said you're interpreting the Hobbs Act, which is the federal anti-extortion law, way too broadly here. Well, I was not in court, but I was following it as closely as I could, and it seemed as if the case had holes in it. The judge seemed openly skeptical, even hinting he might do a directed acquittal. But for Ken Brissett and Tim Sullivan, the two aides there, the verdict was negative, and now I'm sure there will be an appeal.
Right.
It opens up a whole can of worms here. I don't think anyone likes the notion that public officials or their employees would try to extort benefits for cronies, or in this case for a union that had been a political supporter of the mayor's, and these are pro-union guys. Tim Sullivan used to work for the AFL-CIO. I don't think anyone condones the notion that they should be allowed to use public things like a permit for a concert in an extortionate way. But, you know, what now happens to the city's policy of making developers provide community mitigation funds when they build a big project? You know, you want that project, you got to build a park. Is that now illegal? It opens up a whole can of worms that's going to be really difficult for public officials here and elsewhere around the country to deal with. It wouldn't surprise me to see this case winding up before the Supreme Court.
Could be precedent-setting moving
could
forward.
Be.
All right. Obviously, this was a tough week. We had two mass shootings last weekend in El Paso and in Dayton. And let's talk about the president's response to this and how you think he did this week responding to these.
Well, look, it was good that he went to these two cities and at least met with and thanked the first responders and hospital workers. That's something we expect of a president. I mean, his visits did not appear to provide much consolation to the people of those cities, the victims or their survivors, because he's not very good at being a consoler. Bill Clinton was probably the best at that, okay? But look, the broader question here, has the president's harsh rhetoric on immigration resulted or helped fuel, in the case of El Paso, where the alleged shooter had published a manifesto replete with anti-immigrant language that in some cases almost directly quoted the president? Has he acted irresponsibly? You know, that's a question that I think is going to be part of the calculation in November of next year, when people go to the polls. You know, do they feel that he's been irresponsible? Do they want another 4 years of it? However, for people for whom immigration is this hot-button issue, who cheer on this kind of rhetoric, you know, they don't appreciate the president being blamed for it. And, you know, I don't think you can say, well, he caused the shooting. That's a stretch. But there's no doubt about it that the environment is highly toxic, highly divisive. There are bad actors out there who will consider doing things like this in an environment like it. I think the president and the White House would be well advised to not double down necessarily, but to really rethink and maybe work with the president on trying to rein in some of this, if that's even possible. I don't know that it is.
All right, since you mentioned 2020, one of the frontrunners, or the frontrunner, I should say, on the Democratic side, Joe Biden, getting emotional during an interview. He's really sounding off on Trump. And talk about, you know, he had a few stumbles here and there, but when you see this behavior and him really coming out strong, do you think that he's found his messaging, he's hit his stride here?
I think we're starting to see Joe Biden kind of find his footing. Let me put it that way. And this in no way is a prediction that he's going to prevail here. You've seen his once large lead in the polls, which was, as I've often said, built on name recognition. You've seen that really come down to earth, whereas now he's within shouting distance of other top-tier candidates, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, even Kamala Harris. So, there's a long, long way to go here. But I think both in the CNN interview, when Biden spoke very movingly about what he would say to those who lost loved ones in El Paso and Dayton, and he connected it with his own incredibly tragic experience, his wife and young daughter killed in a car crash when he was much younger, the loss of his adult son to cancer. He spoke very movingly about how you cope with that and about how you need to have hope and that one day you'll think of your loved one first with a smile before the tears come. I mean, this is Biden at his most human and approachable. And then the speech ripping Trump was also very well written and strongly delivered. So, ultimately, the Democratic race is going to be decided by what voters really want. Democratic primary voters. They want to go with ideology and change and that kind of message, or they want someone who they personally like, who's going to be the antidote to Trump. And Biden, I think, is making strides in positioning himself to be that second choice there.
Sounds good. Still sort of a long way away. So
it is.
We'll be watching.
6 months till New Hampshire votes.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy though. It's only 6 months away till.
Feels like 6 years.
Yeah, we'll see what happens between now and then.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, John. You
Good
too.
to see
Appreciate it. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week for What a Week.